Happy Valentine's Day, friend. By the time you listen to this recording, it will no longer be Valentine's Day. Regardless, this podcast is my gift to you because it's something truly special. It's my delight to bring you into conversation with Michelle T., one of, if not the most prolific writers I know. She's the author of over 20 books, including the cult classic Valencia, which was made into a feature length art film, as well as Modern Tarot and the essay collection Against Memoir. Her latest book, Modern Magic Stories, Rituals, and Spells for Contemporary Witches, was released in the fall of 2024, not too long before our interview was recorded. A lot has changed since then, the calendar year and the world itself. I loved Modern Magic from the opening paragraph. Months later, it feels like a manual for survival. There's a lot more to say about Michelle, which is why you should head over to Art of the Zodiac on Substack to read the bonus print interview. While you're there, consider becoming a paid subscriber and support the radical act of conversation.
Talk, 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 talk. Art of the Zodiac presents Talk, 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 talk.
What mug are you drinking out of today?
It's actually not that exciting to me
Okay.
because I wasn't there when it was purchased. It's for this pie company that that TJ, my husband, brought our kid to when they went on a little bonding camping trip and they went to this pie shop. So it doesn't really mean a lot to me, except it does have this indentation
Oh, for
your thumb.
That's
So
great.
it's kind of cool. I just grabbed it. I didn't make a good, choice. I should have had my witch mug. I have
Is
a
that
mug
your
that
favorite?
yeah, it's a witch's face. It's like 3D. It's like Mother Shipton, so she's like green with a big nose and like the hat. It's really great. It's really, really great. It's also like I thrifted it, so it's like a million years old, and I'm always afraid that at some point I'm gonna pour hot coffee in it and it's just gonna like crack apart.
That could, but maybe you'll thrift another.
It could happen. I thrifted also this amazing novelty coffee mug that's like a mug of beer. It just looks
Ooh.
like it's like from The Simpsons, like a Simpsons mug of beer, but then you put coffee in it. And it's pretty stupid. I like it a lot.
I love that we're starting here. I was just listening to I believe it's your newest book. It's hard to tell because you release a book like every week.
Is it Modern Magic?
It's Modern Magic.
Yes, that's my new book.
So I don't know if you've released a new one since October.
I have not. No. Oh my God, no.
And I love that. Like, I think my favorite, I have so many favorite things about you, is that the way that you make magic so approachable is infused into your everyday life. And this idea of like, owning the moniker of witch is just really like, it's just really nice. You're like everyone's cheerleader. So I'm bringing this up right now to the thrifting thing, because I feel like you're one of those people who has an actual like magical thrifting practice.
I feel like I actually do have a magical thrifting process. And in fact, I don't know if you can see what I'm wearing, but this is like, I love, one of my favorite things to thrift are like vintage nightgowns. And I got this at a Salvation Army in Yonkers, New York. And it's so intense. It's got these like puffy sleeves. It's like my platonic ideal of like a vintage nightgown. And so I bought it for like, I don't, it was like $1 or $3. And I brought it home and I pulled the tag, like the Salvation Army tag had been stapled to the tag on the nightgown. Yeah. So I pulled it off. It's fucking Christian Dior. This is like a Christian Dior nightgown, which I'm not surprised because I was like, whoa, that is like next level. Often I get Vanity Fair, which they're like these polyester, right? Like shapeless polyester, shimmery nightgowns that like my grandmother wore. I love those too. But like this was like, when I saw this, I was like, ooh, who's that queen? That's next level.
And I love that you didn't even buy it for the label. You just
I
felt
know, and I would have because I am like that, but I didn't even know. I know.
Just actually, when I think of you, I think of three things. I think of writing, I think of magic, and I think of thrifting.
I'm honored.
Where did those all come into your life at the same time? Like, it's hard to interview you because I mean, many reasons. By the way, you also have like what, 13? How many books do you have?
A
13?
lot. I have
Do you
like
count?
20 or something because
Wow.
if you count books that I edited, and if you count like anthologies that I've edited, and I have a novel coming out that's written, it's completed, that's coming out like next year on Feminist Press. So there's a lot. There is a lot. It's true.
See what I'm so ADD. I'll reel myself back. Okay, magic, magic, thrifting, writing. Like, where's do they all come into your life at the same time? Different
I
parts,
mean, I
points?
guess kind of different kind of, but like they are really linked, I think, in
Mhm.
that they all really rose to prominence, in my early 20s when I was finally out on my own and like a free bird in the world and stuff. But let me see, magic, I kind of, and I write about this in the book. It's like
Yeah.
I have, the women in my family were like Tetley tea addicts, and and chain smokers, and would sit around drinking tea and smoking and talking about like spooky stuff, like their prophetic dreams and astrology, and but then they were also like guilty Catholics, so they would be like, it's just for fun, don't take it seriously, it's not real, don't talk about it. So I came into my own more around it as a teenager, a goth teenager in the 80s in New England, discovering occult stores with my friends and getting really interested in tarot and finding different magic books that were really accessible. The one I really remember was called The Modern Witch's Spell Book, and that was a really fun book to have. There was volume 1 and volume 2. I loved them. So that was that. And then, thrifting was also really important as a goth because where else can you get your clothing? You certainly in the 80s as a goth can't get your clothing at the mall or any place normal because then you would look normal. So you have to go, I remember in Boston, there used to be a really great, I think it was a Goodwill that was downtown, very close to the North End. And there would just be so many like widow's weeds, just like black lace dresses, black lace morning dresses in the 80s. And that was really great. So that's basically, all my clothes were thrifted starting in high school.
Have you noticed a big change in thrift stores throughout your career? Right,
Oh,
like when
yeah.
you were thrifting in the 80s, were those clothes from like the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, it was, and you could even find things from, the 30s and 40s and 50s, right? And also thrifting wasn't what it is now. There were a few vintage stores when I was a teenager. There was one that still exists. It's called Una's
Mhm.
it's in Harvard Square in Cambridge, and that's where I got my velvet cape. But mostly you wouldn't go there because they had the prices jacked up as vintage stores always do. But even what they had jacked up, comparatively to today was like nothing. But yeah, we saw, I think in the 90s, thrifting get really popular and, you know, kind of this thing happened in the 90s where everyone wanted to look sort of like working class,
Mhm.
because of grunge. So people turned to thrift stores and then, of course, with the internet, people, selling things online and a lot of thrifting moving online to places like Poshmark. And so, yeah, everything has changed a ton. And it always is scary. Like it's the death of thrifting, but it never is, which is great.
It's interesting, it seems like there's a parallel there between magic. Like, I'm wondering too, with the occult, like the hidden, and thinking of I'm guessing when you were first, and by the way, I love in your book how you describe the occult store, right? Like how you love like the smells and the whole sort of like vibe of them is terrific.
Yes. Yeah. It really felt like walking into a place of real mystery. And even though they're just like public stores that anybody could go in, it felt
Yeah.
like they were just there for us. Like, some like shimmering portal entered and opened and we walked in. But I mean, absolutely. I've seen magic become more and more, I guess, for lack of a better word, mainstreamed, although that
Mhm.
sounds so bad. And I don't actually think it's bad what has happened with the kind of explosion of people interested in magic. I think that I've always known that it was a really great spiritual practice for weirdos and misfits and outsiders. And I think that maybe there's just even more weirdos, misfits, and outsiders than there used to be because, um, you know, you can find the truth about the world so much easier now because of the internet, you know, and you can find your people, and you can just really embrace being like out, you know, work as you can really embrace being a person who's working against the patriarchy, who's working against, you know, capitalism. And I think it's great that there are just more people who care about things like that. And that, you know, also as we do these things, as we fight against the patriarchy, we're also spiritual creatures. And so we often want something, some sort of outlet for that, or a place to express that. And witchcraft has always been a place that's been so welcoming and independent and um, supportive of your individuality and your independence.
And I love that you make it so accessible for people, right? Like I think that's what I love about your books is they bring in this one, at least it brings in the historical as well. How much
Mhm.
time did you spend researching this? Has this been just sort of like an ongoing life project, or was there a focus here?
There was a real focus while I was writing the book. You know, I knew I wanted to bring in history, so I did a lot of like scouring of like, you know, whose history, you know, I knew it wasn't going to be a comprehensive history book, so I didn't want to put that pressure on. But like, could I offer a little bit of like tidbits about this or that person? And that was really fun for me because also the book is so much about me and my history, and it's nice to get out of myself and think about something else, you know? So yeah, I loved doing that. And I love making magic accessible. You know, I've really benefited from magic kind of being accessible to me, you know? And I'm always surprised. Like, I don't know, I'm not a person who feels like I'll just like rush into things and not think about it. But you know, I know that that's not everybody is like that. And so when I hear people be kind of like scared, not scared of it, but like intimidated or hesitant, I'm always like, no, it's for you, you know, go get in there. So I love that that comes through in the book, you know. I teach a workshop pretty regularly called Writing for Witches. And it's really funny because being a writer and being a witch are two kind of identities that I have found that people feel like they really need permission to claim, you know, like you could be writing your butt off, but still be like, oh, I don't know if I'm a writer. I'm not really a writer. And it's like, yes, you are. You write. You're a writer. And it's sort of the same thing for like being a witch. It's like you could be reading tarot cards or talking to the elements or having all of this sort of like feelings of connectedness and still be like, I don't know if I'm a witch. And it's like, I don't know, you seem like a witch to me. So I love helping people claim those identities because they've been such a joy for me to claim.
Do you remember when because you talk about falling in love and finding magic at the occult store and with the women in your family, but do you remember either one or both of these instances when you identified as a witch and or when you identified as a writer?
I mean, I think that I started identifying as a witch. I think it was something that people kind of put on me first, like, and I, you know, like being in Catholic school and being freaky and stuff like that. Um, I think it was maybe meant as an insult, but I liked it, you know? And it took me a minute to claim it. And it wasn't, I felt like I identified with being witchy first, you know? I'm like, yeah, I am witchy, you know, whatever that means. And then I was just like, no, I think I'm just a fucking witch. I'll just be a witch, you know? I think I was in my 20s. Even through my teens, I don't think, even though I was definitely a witch in my teens, I don't think I really claimed it. Except, and I think that part of it was because the way that it was used as an insult against me made the whole term feel sort of fake. Like people would
Mm.
call me a Satanist too, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm a Satanist. And then just like, is that even real? Like nothing seemed real. They all seemed like bugaboos that like the dummies in my town were afraid of. So it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, I am a witch. You know, that is a thing. And as for a writer, I felt like I always knew I was a writer. Actually, I started writing really young. And even when I was, you know, right out of high school, I mean, I remember like, yeah, I remember having a boyfriend in high school who was like working on a book. He was writing a book with a friend. And I remember hearing he was doing that. And I remember saying, oh, I'm a writer too, which was like really wild because I hadn't really written that much. But I just knew that about myself. And when I was trying to go to I didn't really go to college, but I went for, like, 2 semesters, and I didn't go for writing because I had felt like I already was a writer, and I should go for something that I could learn and that could maybe I could funnel into my writing, that could somehow support my writing, so I was going to go for, like, psychology, um, you know, and then women's studies when I found feminism, and then I just dropped out. The real feminist thing to do.
I'm curious to take a little detour. Like, what did that look like?
Well, I went to, my family was really broke, and so and nobody had ever gone to college, and my sister is just like a real high-powered genius, and she figured it out, and she went to college. So it wasn't like it was totally impossible, but for me, it kind of was. Like, I was a teenage alcoholic, I was super counterculture, like, it wasn't like I was like, "Yes, college is everything, I'm gonna put 100% into it." I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm supposed to do this, but no one's really helping me," and my mother's clearly stressed out about, like, that it costs like $50 every time you apply to a college, and it just all felt kind of yucky. And then I ended up going for 1 semester to Salem State College. It was a state college in Salem, Massachusetts. And I picked it both because it seemed accessible, and it is, it's a state school. And also, like, when I was a teenager, I had my best friend lived in Salem, and she had a really good friend who worked at the radio station for Salem State and played really cool music. So I just, like, had it in my head that, like, Salem State was cool, and it, like, wasn't. It was awful. Like, it was really homophobic and terrible, and I got a really bad education. I didn't like it. I stayed in a dorm because I wanted that experience. I stayed in a dorm for, like, actually, I was there for 2 semesters. 1 semester I was in a dorm, and then the next semester I kinda couldn't afford it, so I was, commuting from home, and that was awful. So then I thought I would transfer to UMass Boston, which is a real commuter school. There really are no dorms, and, Eileen Miles went there, which is really cool. So I went there for 1 semester, and during that time it was also pretty stupid, but I did have a really great English teacher who was the first person to give me, like, positive feedback on my writing, and he was, like, really wacky, and I've always remembered him. But at that same time, I found the, research book, Angry Women, which is just interviews with these, like, wild as fuck female performance artists. So Annie Sprinkle is in there, Carolee Schneeman, um, Diamanda Galas, Karen Finley, like, all of these people who were out there just, like, putting their thoughts into the actions of their body in this way that, like, I just had never even heard of. Like, I didn't even know about performance art. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, there's this whole world out there of people who are really embodying these things I'm concerned with, these things that are attractive and inspiring and enervating to me. And here I am in this dumb school that I paid for myself. Like, I took a couple years off after high school and saved up money, and then just, like, wasted it on my education, like, totally wasted it. Could have taken it and moved to San Francisco so much earlier, and then really kind of thrown myself into the mix. But after that, I was like, this is a waste of my time. Like, I just learned more reading this Angry Women book than I have learned in these 3 semesters in school. And, like, maybe if I'd gone to a better school that was, like, more interesting, cutting edge, I don't know, or maybe education just sucked right then. I mean, it was before queer studies, it was before gender studies. I had a women's studies class that I really loved, but even that was sort of like, I mean, we my teacher was just like this like New England bulldog who, like, brought, like, Sweet Honey in the Rock records in and made us listen to, like, Sweet Honey in the Rock. But I loved her, I was so desperate for queer people and she was really great in so many ways, but it wasn't my scene. So I ended up running away to San Francisco on the heels of a really dramatic breakup. Because my best friend was Peter Pizzi was out there, and I was like, just didn't know what to do with myself, and just thought I would visit him and then maybe, like, be really nomadic. But there was such a vibrant spoken word scene happening in San Francisco that I finally found a place to kind of put my writing. And then that knowing that there was a place to receive it became very generative, and I started writing like crazy. I knew I was a writer, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't imagine I would ever get a book published, so, like, I didn't know how to proceed with it until I landed in San Francisco and saw, "Oh, you can," between learning about performance art in the Angry Women book and then finding these open mics where people were just, like, getting on the stage and, like, expressing themselves, it, like, clicked for me.
When I think of you, again, think of, I think of you in many ways because you're a very dynamic person. But one of the words that comes to me is community, because you're always, whether I mean, promoting an anthology that you've edited, or with your own press, um, uh, promoting other writers, or just books that you really, really like. I think you're always promoting other people or inviting people into performance, etc. So thinking about the early scene, the spoken word scene in San Francisco, how much from the very beginning did community inspire you or shape you as a writer?
It totally did 100%, because I started going to these open mics and I wanted to be a part of the scene, I started hearing, I mean, I heard a lot of trash, obviously, but I started hearing things that were really inspiring to me, like, I heard Beth Lissick, I heard Ali Liebegot, I heard Justin Chin, I heard Marcy Blackman, I heard Bucky Sinister. I mean, these are all writers who really shaped me, and I wanted to be in community with them. I wanted to be in conversation with them. David West was a kind of obscure writer who was hugely important to me. So yeah, being part of that. I also had no friends when I got to San Francisco. Like, I had Peter, which was like, that meant a lot because he was like my best friend, but I didn't know anybody. And then I was like, oh, I want to know these people. So yeah, it was really, really important to me. And I've always liked to kind of gather people together and do something fun. Like when I was like a kid, I would always be kind of rounding everybody up and trying to like make a haunted house or make a play or things like that. So I do have this impulse to sort of like gather and not control, but like maybe be the one to say like, hey, let's do this thing and like try to make it happen. So yeah, and then we started Sister Spit. I started it with Cindy Anderson because Cindy had come to town from Chicago and had been in the poetry scene there and had wanted to start like an all girl open mic in San Francisco. And Harry Dodge, who was running the Bearded Lady Cafe, had said, "Oh, you should connect with Michelle T. She like knows all the poets." And so I met with Cindy and I brought this like stack of like everybody's chapbooks, poetry chapbooks, and being like, "Oh, you gotta meet Beth, you gotta meet Allie, all this stuff. You gotta meet Clint Catalyst." And so Cindy was like, "Do you just want to do this with me?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really fun." So we did our own open mic, and it was such a revelation because I had been going to the regular, like not all girl, like everybody welcome open mics for a while, and there weren't a ton of first of all, there weren't a ton of female poets. And then of those female poets, there weren't a ton of queer female poets. And this wasn't hugely surprising. I mean, a lot of these readings were very male dominated. They were very boozy. They were in these bars. People were wasted. And it really favored a sort of aggro poetry. Like you had to be willing to get up on the stage and be like, shut the fuck up, which like I loved doing. Like I was so into that then. But I also realized like not all women want to do that. Not all, lesbians or queers want to do that because we're, so often writing things that are really vulnerable and these spots aren't going to feel welcoming. So I was like, well, that would be really cool to have an all girl place. And I wonder if we'd get I bet there are, women writers out there and dyke writers out there that would like to read their stuff, but don't want to go to these sausage parties. And that's exactly what happened. It became a hugely popular for quite a while, which was great.
I can't remember where, but I heard it described that one of the reasons you started it, or someone was talking about maybe their experience as part of it, was that like it sort of elevated you to the status of like seeing musicians go on tour, right? This sort of like fun like touring musician lifestyle, and being able to sort of have that as a poet, because you also toured a lot, right?
Yes, we started touring in 1997 and we did in 97, 98, and 99, we did big month-long, we were on the road for the entire month tours, and especially more towards 98 and 99, we started also doing little regional tours where we go up to the Pacific Northwest, where there was like a really thriving sort of like dyke-centric art scene, mostly music happening up there. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing happened because I did Sister Spit the open mic for a couple years, and then I was playing drums in a band, Dirt Bike Gang, and we went on tour up to the Pacific Northwest and back, and then down to LA as well, and San Diego. And it was before Lady Fest, but there was some other festivals happening. There was one called like Supergirl Conspiracy that was happening, and queer music was still very underground, but it was kind of taking off. Like Slater Kinney were around, but they hadn't sort of become the superstars that they would become. They were still playing like Supergirl Conspiracy and things like that. So we went on this tour, and I don't drive, but I love road trips, and I love America. I mean, I don't love the government, and I don't love probably most of the people, but I love the landscape and the weirdness. And it was so fun to be on a tour, except like my band kind of sucked. Like we couldn't really play I don't know, like I wasn't a consistent drummer. Sometimes I could do it and sometimes I couldn't do it very well. And also like we were really dysfunctional as a group of people. And I was coming from San Francisco where I'd done Sister Spit for a couple years. And I had found the literary community to be so friendly and supportive. And then suddenly I was in this music community and people were so like attitudey and like unfriendly. And it was really weird. I was like, what is going on? I'm so used to everybody, supporting each other, but I didn't catch that vibe. So when we came back from our tour, the band broke up. And I was like, that's fine. But I want to go on tour still. And I'm like, if we managed to go on tour and we were not even good, I bet I could take, like, the writers I know are like legit good. Like maybe we could go on tour. And it was the moment of time where like the poetry slam was just starting. So there was suddenly, these like poetry events that people were going to around the country. There were some places that were real hot spots for that, like Austin and Chicago. In between poetry slam connections and punk show connections, queer bar connections, queer bookstore connections, we sort of pieced together this tour where we were performing in a wide variety of places. And it was really cool because San Francisco in the 90s, everyone was from somewhere else. Nobody was actually from San Francisco. So you could just like walk into like the Bearded Lady Cafe and say to everybody sitting there, like, if Sister Spit was going to go to your hometown, where would we play? And people would be like, oh, there's this drag bar, or like, oh, there's this art space. Like everyone just knew the place in their town that would host a thing like that. And so that's how we did it. I mean, there was no internet, so we couldn't Google like, venues and, North Carolina. We had to rely on the person who was from North Carolina who'd been in the theater and said, oh, there's a theater space that does poetry readings.
There's so much to unpack there, and I'm gonna try to catch a thread that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I always wonder, and this is a very sort of banal question, how like on a very mundane level, how you work. Because just thinking about how much energy it takes to organize other people to organize an entire tour. And this is something I think that you've in many ways have continued on your entire career. Like
Mm-hmm.
have always been organizing. And then having the time to write your own work. Like how have you done that?
I don't know. I'll give you an example, okay, of yesterday. Okay, yesterday was one day of work that I actually had this day of work yesterday, and I woke up and I got to work on a bunch for my small press dopamine, right? So there was some stuff waiting for me yesterday. What did I even do yesterday? I tried to get some places, we're doing an anthology called Witch that's out in April. And I've been collecting all the contributors' bios and their locations and trying to sort out where we might do events. So I worked on that a little bit, which was really fun. And I put in, a little email. I sent an email to a place in Joshua Tree where we might do it. And what else did I do? I followed up on my modern magic stuff because the book is still new. So I have a lot of emails from my publisher about different things that are, going to be happening. So I made sure that I got in touch with them. I did a lot of texting with my fellow dopamine publishers, Beth and Brooke. And then I just decided, I should really work on, I have a book that I'm writing called Free Love. It's about polyamory. And like in August, I had met a bunch of really sweet polyamorous people from San Diego, a bunch of queers. And I said, will you guys have a poly party and invite me so I can like interview you and all your friends? And they did. So I went and I just took all these notes. And so yesterday, what was this, like 4 months later, I finally printed out my notes and I wrote for like 6 hours and I just burped out this like 10,000 word chapter. And I'm so proud of myself because I'm like, I want such immediate gratification of like praise. Like, usually something like that, like I'm like, I'm so shocked I didn't just send it to my editor right away and been like, look at me, I just wrote 10,000 words, because probably like 3,000 words need to be cut from it, So today I will look at it and I will, chop away from it. But this book is due in September, and this is only the second chapter that I've written. So I don't spend enough time writing my own work, and every day is different. And sometimes it's like what's up in my face. Like today, this morning, I woke up at 9. I had to have a meeting with the Frameline Queer Film Festival in San Francisco because in June, it will be the 25th anniversary of my book, Valencia. And there's actually a film project based on the book. And so I pitched it to Frameline, and they're going to screen it in June in San Francisco. And we're going to build a Valencia walking tour of the Mission, because the book takes place in the Mission. Yeah, I know. So I had that meeting, and then I felt really inspired. So I sent emails to the Provincetown Film Society. I sent to the New Fest in New York City to see if they wanted to, they can't do a walking tour, of course, but if they wanted to screen Valencia. And then I had text messages from my dopamine author, Vera Blossom, saying, will you please share with me all the people you sent my galley to, so I don't double dip while I'm promoting my book. So I sent that to her. And then I had, I don't, it's just like, incoming, what's happening,
Feels and maybe this is where the magic comes in. I'm like, wow, you are a person who lives in the moment. But thinking about, like, you're like, oh, I did all these things, and like, I'm like, that sounds like a day. Like, I'd be depleted. And then you're like, oh, but then I just wrote for 6 hours. Are you always? I know.
Crazy afterwards. I was like, I walked into my bedroom and my husband was in there like watching TV on his computer, and I just was like a zombie. I was like, he's like, are you okay? You've been gone for a while. And I'm like, I know, I was in my mind. It's a really creepy place. A really, really creepy place. Feels creepy to write for that long. It feels like it really just, I come out feeling like I just was on a drug bender or something. Like I feel vaguely ashamed of myself. I'm like proud because I'm like, I finished a chapter, and I'm also like, oh, you were in your mind, just like writing whatever came into your mind for 6 hours. Like, that's crazy. That's a crazy way to spend 6 hours.
I'm assuming you don't write for 6 hours every day.
No, I don't.
That
I
it's a little bit.
definitely do not, and I won't write today, but I might edit today. Like, I hope to edit today. Yeah.
I remember in a conversation once you said you used to really love, and I'm forgetting, was it reading or writing at bars, or was it both?
Oh, writing at bars.
Okay.
Because I loved to drink. I thought that I loved writing so much, but really I loved drinking and the way that it freed me up to write, and I would write in bars, and and bars are great places to write. I could drink, I could smoke, I could indulge all my vices, because writing is a very compulsive, to me it feels very like a compulsive thing. I get like sweaty and I'm all like, and then afterwards, like I do, like, I'm trying not to smoke because as a tarot reader, I just had 3 in-person readings this week where I read for people in their 60s and older. And I just, I'm 53, and people's health were such issues. Like I just kept hearing, people wanted readings about their health. And I was like, damn, like that's coming for me. I feel like I need to be in training for old age. And like, I'm not, I'm like writing, sitting in a chair without moving for 6 hours, then getting up and smoking a cigarette on my back porch. Like that is really cool when you're 25. But like when you're 53, I don't know what replaces it though. And that's what's hard because I'm either wired like this or I've habituated myself. I've habituated my body and my psyche, or both. But it's like feels so compulsive. And afterwards, I just want to ingest something like a cigarette, but I got to stop.
But you do, if I mean, I'm hearing in memory, you've mentioned you have like maybe a cigarette a day. Is that
Yeah.
like
I do. I
one?
only had one. I know, but it's so weird because I know that's not a big deal. I mean, I grew up in a house of chain smokers. I
Mhm.
used to smoke I used to be a much more of a smoker, but to the way that I feel so addicted to that one cigarette
Mm.
is just like uncomfortable. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm sober now, but like the feeling of addiction just feels so gross, to just feel like I'm out there and I'm like, I think I'm enjoying this cigarette. But like, what is it to even enjoy a cigarette? It's so nasty. You know what I mean? You're like, I think I'm enjoying the way that my lungs feel suddenly like they're filled with cobwebs and now I stink, and I need to take a shower because I hate the smell of myself. Like what? It's very confusing. And that's how I think, it's addiction, It's like the bowl of ice cream I ate last night, not addiction, totally lovely. Loved every bite of it. Delicious, but like the cigarette, you're like, what? What is it?
It's funny because I'm not a smoker. I've never been a smoker. I don't like the smell of smoke, et cetera, et cetera. But every time I hear you and your one cigarette story, I have this sort of like love of it. I'm like, oh, you're ingesting just a little bit of poison.
I mean, I love that story of it too, and it's so funny because I have a text thread with some friends and we really support each other. We do gratitude lists every day and stuff. So I was sharing, I was like, you guys, I feel like I know it's just one cigarette, but it's making me feel out of control and I feel addicted and I feel like I need to like, prep for old age. And one of my friends was like, oh, I read this article once with an interview with Gwyneth Paltrow, and she just has like a single American spirit every day. And I'm like, that is the article that made me start smoking again. I'm like, I know that article. And like, yes, I want to be Gwyneth Paltrow, just like with the best healthcare and the best like facial skincare and like having my one little American spirit every day. But like, I just don't know. I don't know if that's my path, good luck to her. I don't know.
What will replace it though? Because I feel like we
I
all
know.
have some sort of vice.
I know. I agree with you. And I support that. I'm not trying, to be super pure or anything like that, I mean, that can have its own allure for sure sometimes, but there's always like there's a time limit on it. I can't really live like that forever. So I don't know. I just got a new vibrator. I don't know. Yeah. I'm saying all this and now I just want a cigarette so bad. And here's the thing, as long as there's a pack of cigarettes in my house, I probably, I'm always like, I'm going to quit when I'm done with this pack. I mean, that's a smoker thing to say, It's like an addicted to cigarettes thing to say. I'm just going to finish this pack. I don't want to waste it. It was $15,
Yeah.
American spirits are expensive.
Do people gift them to you? Is that how you get more?
No. I buy them from the bodega. I live across the street from an Armenian bodega, which is awful because I can just like run across the street and buy a pack of cigarettes,
I won't tell anyone.
We are broadcasting it. We're broadcasting my vices.
I brought up
Coffee makes me want to smoke as well.
a coffee. I'm drinking actually I'm drinking some sort of mushroom tea mix, but I've recently moved to decaf.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've ever gone in a no caffeine period.
I tried to quit coffee once and I got really depressed, and then I learned that it's like an antidepressant. I'm on legitimate antidepressants now, so that probably wouldn't happen to me. That was a long time ago. But when I was pregnant, they make you cut down. The first time I was pregnant, I didn't drink any coffee. And then I had a miscarriage anyway. And so then when I got pregnant again, I let myself drink that 1 cup. You're allowed 1 cup a day. So I had that.
I by the way, I love coffee. I just like saying
Yeah.
that I gave up caffeine. It feels like, but I don't want to be
Nice,
one
it
of
feels
those.
pure, and that's a vibe. It feels, like,
Yeah.
really nice,
It's as
yeah.
close as I'm gonna get to pure is my no caffeine, so I'm really gonna just broadcast that everywhere. Um, but back to the bar scene, for some reason, I was thinking, oh, like a sporadic writing process of the person who like writes in the moment, and we can get there. But I'm curious, right? Like, how did you quit drinking? And especially because, and how did that affect your writing process? Because you said at that point, it was what gave you the courage to write. Did you have difficulty writing after you quit drinking?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think it's really common for writers to think that their creativity comes from something other than themselves, and I think it's because, creativity is so mysterious. Why does it feel so good sometimes and other times not? And sometimes you're stuck and sometimes you flow, and it can feel like you have no control over it. So I think that these external things that we can control, like having a drink, like they become very we put a lot of importance on them. What I did learn is that it's really hard to stay with your writing, to keep going with it because, you can be it's you and your brain, it's you and your mind, and you can be very self-critical, you can get stuck, you can feel confused, you can just want to get up, especially if you're writing in your own house, you can get distracted. You can, oh, I should clean that, I should go get a snack. For me, when I drank and wrote, it just kept me going. I just stayed there. I stayed there because I felt so good because I was drinking. I was
Mhm.
smoking, and I had it all for me. So those compulsive, weird, addicty feelings that do come up for me when I'm writing were immediately satisfied. So when those were gone, I would feel all those feelings sitting there, and I was also the first thing I wrote sober was a fictional novel, and it was my first fictional novel. I had only written memoir, so it was a completely different challenge, and I had a whole new batch of insecurity, and a lack of faith in my abilities. But I realized that I remember I was visiting Boston, and I was newly sober, and I was rereading Eileen Miles's poetry collection, Not Me. This is a poetry collection that has been really important to me in my life. And Eileen is sober, and I'm friends with her now. I didn't start out friends with her. I started out as a fan, and now I'm both. But knowing a little bit of the timeline of their life, I was like, oh, wait. And I realized, oh, wow, they wrote this sober. They wrote this book when they were sober. And it just gave me so much. And I texted them and I was like, you wrote Not Me Sober, huh? And they were like, yeah. Because they've always been a very big supporter of my sobriety. And so that was really, really helpful just to know, like, oh yeah, like it's going to feel different. But, at that point, I was just kind of established somewhat as a writer, established enough that I knew there was no way but forward. I would have to figure it out. So I just kept at it, and it is different, but the reality is that drinking and writing had ceased to work. It had facilitated writing for a period of time, and then it started becoming the enemy of writing. And that's just what happens when you're an alcoholic. It stops having the effect on you that you love, and it starts having these other effects, but you still can't stop because you keep doubling down and being like, it's going to be different this time. It's going to be like it used to be this time. And, that's the nature, that's addiction. So, for a while, I was drinking, and it was like I was just trying to rewrite Valencia. I was like, I'm going to write about having sex in a bathroom and getting drunk. And it's like, that's, I don't know, that's not a book. It's like, that's, there's so much to say about addiction, but when you are in the throes of addiction, you don't really grow as a person. So I had ceased sort of growing as a person, certainly growing as a writer. And it's just so indicative, of addiction, that I just was trying to rewrite the same book again and again, and like couldn't make any progress even on a shitty book. It just was like I knew it was shitty, and I'd start over and write something else shitty and start over. And so yeah, getting sober preserved my writing, but I did have to learn how to keep myself in the seat I would, bribe myself with treats. You can get a treat. Because also when you're quitting drinking, you crave sugar a lot because you've been, dousing your body with sugar in the form of alcohol for like years. And so you do get these really intense sugar cravings. And so I would be like, you get to eat candy or cookies, after you've written a chapter.
What was that book that came out of that first period of sobriety?
It's a novel called Rose of No Man's Land. And yeah, it was my first fiction, and I really like it. I think it's a great book, actually. It's really sad because it was on this small indie press that went bankrupt. And I think they sold all the rights to their books to some like rando dude on the Isle of Man who now owns the rights to all of our books and just keeps them in print electronically, but we can't get the rights back. So it's really hard. It's like not in, I don't think the book is in print anymore, but I think I really like it. And I wish I could point people to it, but sometimes you can find it used.
Mm. That's so sad.
I
Because that's
know.
like your first book, like that's like your like first sober book.
I know. And some man on a man island has it. A man on the Isle of Man. What could be more patriarchal? Having my and it's like a little coming of age, like sex and drugs, falling in love, like story.
Speaking of sex and
Ooh.
drugs, do you remember, total non sequitur here, but not really, when you first encountered Cookie Mueller? Because I know she's been a really big inspiration for you.
I do. I remember exactly where I was. I was on Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco with my friend Peter Pizzi, who had a copy of the original blue cover semiotext edition of Walking Through Clear Water in a Pool Painted Black. And Peter said, do you know Cookie Mueller? You've got to read her. She was in all of John Waters' movies. And, he just gave me the Cookie Mueller cell. And, me and Peter were goth together, in the 80s as like teens, and we're obsessed with John Waters movies and stuff. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And at that time, I think I was probably still writing poetry, but my poems were about my life. And eventually I wanted to just shine a wider light on these stories and actually tell the whole story and write about my life as a short story, which is exactly what Cookie Mueller is doing. It's what Eileen Miles did in Chelsea Girls. So yeah, so it ended up being a really big influence on me. Like, oh, like, yeah, stories can be true. Like, you don't have to make everything up. In my house, the books were, Stephen King, Danielle Steele, a lot of horror, So this idea that your own life could be the material was still a little foreign to me. I didn't quite trust it. But then I just sort of, I don't know, got that permission from like Cookie, from Eileen, from their work. And then I just like went for it.
I took your Writing for Witches course, the
Thank you.
generative workshop, which is lovely. And by the way, the Coven is still meeting every
I love that
Sunday.
so much.
They're amazing. I popped in one Sunday ago. I can't join them every Sunday. But every time I do pop in, they greet me. It's like that's profoundly changed my life. We can like bookmark that. So thank you. But I say, because in that workshop, I know that one of the practices was finding our writer guides and making an altar to them and really connecting to altar, maybe writers that have passed away that we feel inspired by. And I know that yours was Cookie. And so, right, like which makes me think, like, has she been sort of a bridge between your magic and writing practice?
Yeah, I think so, especially more recently as I have leaned into this idea that I can actually connect with her, which, is something I think a few years ago I would have been like, no, I would have been too scared. Not that I don't believe that someone can connect with her or with a spirit, but I just didn't think that I could. And then beyond that, I didn't trust that if I tried, that I would trust it, It's so interesting. I just saw a really great documentary. I saw a preview. It will be in theaters, I think, at some point, or on Netflix. It's called Look Into My Eyes. And it's an A24 documentary about psychics in New York. And it's so amazing. And I'm getting chills. What was really amazing was to hear them all be like, talk about how unsure they are and how they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I am making it up, and it's like, but maybe that means something too. And like kind of getting beyond that question of like, oh, it's just my imagination. It's like, that's maybe the wrong question. Is it my imagination is the wrong question. Like, um, so yeah, more recently, I have definitely felt like I lean on Cookie a lot for writing support. She's on my altar, which she demanded. She also, I think that it might have been in our class actually when I was meditating, trying to contact her, and she demanded a hot dog. Was it?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was sort of like she wasn't gonna talk to me till I put her on my altar, and then she was on my altar, and then it was like, she wants a hot dog. So when I was teaching Writing for Witches actually live in Provincetown in person this summer, and her ashes are in Provincetown. She lived a bunch of her life in Provincetown. So I got her a hot dog, and I went and sat by the ocean, and I ate it for her, and I had this deck of oracle cards with me, and I did a reading while I ate it, and it was like, um, two cards came up. One is guide, and one was offering, and I was like, oh my god, like what? It's like every time something happens that feel so real. It's just, I'll never get over it. I'm like, whoa, okay. So this is like inspiring me to contact her again. 'Cause I've been doing other mystical stuff, and I think of her all the time, and I acknowledge her. Like when I do tarot readings, when I tend my altar, I always like shout her out, but I haven't really tried to talk to her lately. So maybe I'll do that now.
I also want to point out you did hosted a series of in-person workshops, and um, Brooke's last name,
Palmieri, Brooke
Palmieri,
Palmieri.
did this wonderful workshop on magic and thrifting.
Hmm.
And I think for part of that, you went out thrifting, and like I don't know if you were trying to like bring in Cookie, but she convinced you, like there was a Cookie connection between, should she convince you to buy this mug that you're like, oh my God, this is totally Cookie.
It's not a mug, but
Okay.
and it was, when I did this meditation on
Pony?
her to connect with her, a doggy, a
Okay. I
puppy.
was so wrong, but close
It's
maybe.
okay. Um, and that was when she was like, "I want to be on your altar." And I got a sense, I got a message that there was something at my local Goodwill that she would like to represent her on my altar. And it was great because I had plans to go to the Goodwill that day with my mom, but then my mom canceled on me, and I was like, "Well, I still have to go because there's something waiting there for me." I felt so certain of it. And I went and I combed through the Goodwill, and there was nothing. There wasn't even anything I could kind of try to convince myself was Cookie. There just was nothing that spoke to me that felt remotely her. And I was like, okay, well, whatever, I guess I was wrong. And then I realized it was this weird little cart. Sometimes they have these little carts, and I don't really pay attention to them because they're often piled with shit I don't care about. Like this one was like men's boots and like electronics. So it was like very dark and lots of wires. And I was like, okay, I'll look at it. And so I pushed through it, and underneath it all, hold on.
It's very exciting. Oh, and I get to see the whole nightgown.
Thank you. My Christian Dior nightgown. I'm just going to stay in it all day today. What's this freak? What a freak. Oh my goodness. On a book, right? On a book with this little like tuft of hair. Look at this face.
No words.
No words. I was like, I just started cracking up. I was like, okay, all right, that's for you. And yeah, I did wait a moment before I didn't put her right on the altar because I knew that that workshop with Brooke was coming up. And I was like, oh, I want to bring it in. I want to work with it and do something before I put it on the altar. But yeah, it lives there now. I love it so much. I think a lot about what comes after our lives, and how does this spirit world work, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously I don't know, how can we, but I do feel like we take on these human bodies to experience sensation and what it means to have a body, which is so often awful, but it's also it's so filled with pleasure at the same time. And the very first time I conjured Cookie and I did a tarot reading asking like, various questions. And one of the questions was like, what do you want from me? Like, what can I offer you? And I got the lust card. And I feel like Cookie Mueller is someone who lived their life very lustfully. They were in love, they had sex, they had a baby, they were queer, they were married to a man, they loved art, they traveled, they hitchhiked. I mean, they just really lived. And I felt like that's what Cookie wants from me. Now that she is presumably without a body, to sort of, and that's why she wanted that hot dog, that's really what I felt like. She wanted that hot dog. And, when I was in my workshop, my Writing for Witches workshop in Provincetown, I had done the workshop the morning that I went and got the hot dog. I was telling my students about it. And I was like, I don't eat hot dogs, and they were like, oh, you could get a veggie dog. Like people were like, get a veggie dog. And I was like, Cookie Mueller does not want a veggie dog, like Cookie Mueller wants a fucking hot dog. And guess what? They're good. A hot dog is good, unless you've been vegetarian for so long that it just repulses you. A hot dog is delicious. So I was like, I'm not going to insult her with like a tofu dog. Like I'll do that for myself, but I did eat it and I loved it. And I loved it for her,
Totally. It makes me think of having spent time around a lot of chefs in my life, who make really gourmet food, and like they just eat junk, like pizza, hot
Yeah.
dogs, fast food, because that's like delicious.
It's delicious. Yes, it really is delicious. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you ever feel, whether it's Cookie or another writer, that, maybe even looking back at your life, that maybe some of your writing was, and this is a loaded word, but I think it's the best I have, is like channeled. Do you ever feel that someone else was kind of like whispering in your ear at times, if not giving you the whole manuscript, at least?
I do. I always feel like my writing is channeled, which is different than saying it is channeled. Like it feels channeled for sure. Whether or not it is, I don't know. But I feel like something that energy moves through when I'm writing. I mean, and that I think is what is part of, after, yesterday writing for 6 hours and then stumbling out of my chair is what it feels like a weather front had blown through me. I felt so used and weird, I really did. And excuse me. Yeah, I don't know who it is. I wouldn't put any words to it. I don't know, and it could be just a feeling, or it could be entities, it could be spirit guides, it could be ancestors, it could be, folks I know, folks I don't know. It's hard to say. I'll never know. But yeah, I do feel like that, especially when I go back and look at things that I wrote and I'm like, I have no memory of writing it. I don't remember. Some things I do, but most things I don't remember writing. And I know I'm going to have a weird experience when I sit down today with, the work that I wrote yesterday and being like, what's this?
Is that feeling of that that drained feeling you get after like a 6-hour writing binge, is that the same feeling you get after you've done maybe a really intense card reading for someone?
They're similar. Yeah. Yes, definitely. It's rare that I would do like 6 hours of tarot readings, but I did have this one time, and I was going through a really intense breakup, so I was also carrying a lot of like grief, and it was like New Year's Day, and I just told people, oh, come over, I'll read your cards. Like, cute. What I should have done was had them pick like a card, but I gave everyone fucking like Celtic cross readings. So and once word got out, like people who like I didn't hang out with were just like showing up at my door like for their reading, and I just wanted to sort of be of service, and so I did it. And when everyone left my house that night, I just collapsed. Like I just was sobbing. I was completely spent. I was like, wow, that was not a good idea. Like that was not healthy for me. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely done some tarot. Marathons. Once I did it to I donated all the proceeds to my kids' preschool. It was something I did for the preschool. And so I was like sitting in the preschool for like 6 hours reading everybody's tarot cards. And I didn't melt down like I did because I wasn't, carrying a bunch of grief at that moment, but I did feel sort of like, "Oh, I feel really crazy." Like, I feel like yesterday after I did, all of that writing and felt insane, I had a cigarette, took a shower, put on my Christian Dior nightgown, went downstairs, made a bowl of chicken soup with, like, all the, like, everything in my fridge just, like, went into the soup, and toast with, like, butter and nutritional yeast, and then I went and sat in bed and ate and watched the Will and Harper documentary. It was, like, so perfect. I just had to treat myself like I'd just been traumatized by something. It's like, "Okay, I need care now," all the kinds of care, the vice care of a cigarette, the, like, physical care, of, a shower and some healthy, nourishing food.
Do you sleep?
Well, I'm perimenopausal, so sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Like, 2 nights ago, I slept really great. I had wild dreams. I slept really awesome, and then l last night, I didn't sleep at all. I just tossed and turned all night, and I was like, "Oh, my nightgown, this is so amazing. It's like this, like, satin, but it's, like, flannel lined. Like, how did they do it? It's like a thin flannel lining." So, like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, "Ah, it's the nightgown." I, like, took the nightgown off, and it just was like, "Oh, it's the dog," and I, like, moved the dog, and it wasn't any of those things. If I'm sleeping well, I can sleep, with my flannel nightgown. I'll sweat the bed, but I'll sleep, and I can sleep with the dog, but no. So I don't know what will happen to me today. It was supposed to be this whole day where I was gonna go sell books because I have, like, too many books in my home, and we were gonna go look at art 'cause there's this really great art show up at the ICA, and then TJ, my husband, was like, "Maybe you just wanna chill out tomorrow." And I was like, "Oh, I do. I do wanna chill out." I don't have my child this week. He's with his other parent, so I have all this time to work and chill.
It's good to know you rest because, like, I'm getting anxiety about hearing about your days. Like, that was so much. Um,
I do. I used to not like to nap because day sleeping would just make me think about when I was, like, more of an active addict, and would, like, stay up all night on crystal meth and then sleep in the day, and so it just gives me a weird body memory of waking up in the sun's out and being like, "Oh, I feel like I've done something bad," but now I'm really leaning into napping in my 50s, I think. Yeah, it's important.
I love that. Now, speaking of, well, I don't know, new I'm trying with these transitions and really failing here, but let's
No,
let's
no,
just get to
you're
it.
doing great. You're such a great host.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Um, Going back to that moment where you discover Cookie,
Mhm.
and it's you said first the Cookie, I forget the name of the book, and I've read it,
Yeah, it's
because it's
walking through clear water in a pool painted black. The
and
first
that
first edition. There's a second edition out now.
Semiotext is the one
Yes.
who printed that edition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're now your collaborator, right? Am I getting this right?
Oh,
With
yeah.
Dopamine, and so, one, I guess that's my segue. Can you tell me a little bit about Dopamine,
Mhm.
and, like, how does that feel? Was that, like, a total full circle moment for you?
It is in many ways because they also published my first book, so which was also, like, an incredible experience to have my book published by the people who published Cookie, who published Eileen Miles's book, Not Me, that I was talking about earlier, Anne Rauer's If You're a Girl, another really influential book for me. It was huge, and so that's how I have a sort of connection with them, is through that, and I decided to do a press. It just, I used to run a literary nonprofit in San Francisco called Radar, and I ran it with Beth Pickens and then with other folks, but it really did its best under Beth Pickens because everything she does is magic. And so and I really missed doing that kind of literary organizing. So I contacted her and was like, would you like to Radar with me again? It was called Radar. Would you do it with me again? And I think I heard that I had to leave it behind in San Francisco because all of its funding was San Francisco based, but I heard it wasn't doing very well. And I was wondering if I could maybe get the 501(c)(3) number back and kind of reimagine it as a Los Angeles institution and see what we could do. And she said yes. And um, as it turned out, that plan to reinvent Radar didn't work for a number of reasons. But I had been thinking, well, maybe in this iteration, we'll do a little publishing because I've always wanted to publish. And the only reason why I haven't is that it seems scary financially. And I'm just somebody who grew up low income and is so traumatized by that, and my income is no longer low income unless it is. Like it's, it fluctuates like a writer, like an artist who isn't in control, doesn't have consistent income. So I was really afraid to take something on. But at the same time, something happened to me moving into my 50s where I'm like, oh, all these things that I thought I would eventually do, like I got to do them now because I'm just going to die. You know? You're like, I don't know, in your 20s and 30s and even in your 40s, you're like, I'm going to do that someday. Like, yeah. And then you're like, in your 50s, you're like, oh, I mean, not that I won't have a someday, but my someday is like my 70s. And like, I just don't know what that's going to be like. And I certainly can't presume I'm going to have it together to start a press in my 70s. So we were going to just do a little bit of publishing. And then I quickly realized, like, you either do it or you don't. Like, let's do it. Let's do it. So because I've published so much, I've got a lot of connections with different presses. And I reached out to some to just find out, like, how do you publish? Like, how do you do it? The stuff I was most worried about, concerned about, intimidated by was the actual physical publishing of the books and then the distribution of them out into bookstores, both of which are so crucial, right? So when I met with Eddie L. Colty from Semiotext, he's so sweet, and he was like, do you just want to do it with us? And I'd done imprints before. I had an imprint at City Lights, and I had an imprint at the Feminist Press that still exists. I just don't do it anymore. And they were amazing, amazing opportunities and experiences. And I love the books that I got to put out. But at the end of the day, I needed other people's permission, whether or not to put out, whether I could publish the books that I wanted to publish. And sometimes that was really hard. There was a couple of incidences where there were books I really believed in, I was really passionate about, and I couldn't convince the press to let me do it. And then I just felt like, I'm not getting paid for this. I don't want to do it anymore. So I was worried about that happening. But Eddie was like, no, like you do whatever you want. And we have to pay for everything. So like we have been called an imprint by people, like that Dopamine is an imprint of Semiotext. And I understand why they say that, because Eddie does do some lifting for us, and it's not inconsequential. We send Eddie the manuscripts once they've been copy edited, and he makes sure the galleys happen, that gets to the printer, but we're paying for it all. Like, we pay the money for everything. We take all the risks as far as if the bookseller don't sell. We make all the decisions. Eddie never says yes or no. He is incredibly wise and will offer his opinion sometimes. Like the one time he said, well, I don't know. I think your cover is ugly, but it is your cover. So and I was like, oh my God, no, I don't want a cover that you think is ugly. You have great taste. Like, you are a gay man, Pisces from Morocco, who's been running Semiotext. Like, no, I want your approval very badly. So he's an incredible resource. And he's so generous. But yeah, so that's what it is. And I love that we're associated with Semiotext because I have so much respect for them. And I love Eddie, and I love Chris Kraus. I love their visions, and what they have done, what they continue to do is so cool. I was just reading it. Somebody did an interview with them. I can't remember where, but they were talking about in the interview or in the piece about how they managed to look at the past and honor it and celebrate it in a way that's not, it avoids like nostalgia. It's really interesting because they're putting out a lot of books that, that are maybe reprints and stuff like that, but it's like, these are books that are canon in a way, but because they're queer canon, they haven't been cared for. They've been allowed to go out of print. They never got their full due. So it's this really cool service that they're doing of bringing these books back into print by, like, books by Heather Lewis or Jane DeLynn, it's Kevin Killian. It's like really great. It's really great work that they're doing.
And you just want to, I know your first book, New Mistakes by Clement Goldberg,
Mhm.
that just came out, and there's been a rush of publicity. And I know you were on tour as well with.
Well, yeah, right before New Mistakes came out, we had our anthology. So every year I'm going to edit an anthology with a different theme, and it benefits the press because we're a nonprofit. No one gets paid. We're hustling all the time. So I'm asking people, will you donate a piece of writing? And people, for the most part, are super generous. And some people can't afford to be, which I respect. I get that too. But mostly it benefits the press. So Sluts came out. That was our first one. And I did want to run around with it, even though I don't have a piece in it. I decided, yay, thank you. I decided to not put my own writing in these because I'm going to be publishing one every year. And it just felt like, when am I going to publish my own writing in an anthology every year? It just felt like too much. So, but I did want to run around and help represent it as the editor. And that was really, really fun. So yeah, that was great.
Amazing. So you have, does Dopamine have, how many books does Dopamine have? And can you tell us a little bit about what to expect in the future?
Right now, we just have 2 books that are out on bookshelves, and it's Sluts and New Mistakes. But we will have in December our 3rd book, which is Vera Blossom's How to Fuck Like a Girl. And I just sent out all the galleys to reviewers, and that was really exciting. And one of the things that I was doing this morning was, talking to Vera about how, contacting people via email as well to get attention for the book. In February, we will have a novel by Sean Stewart Ruff called Days Running, which is this really good, it's a little hard, but it's also really satisfying novel about this gay boy coming of age in the 70s in Cincinnati, and he's Black. It's about his family, and he experiences a hate crime, and it kind of turns everything upside down. So I was seeing if somebody would blurb it, and she was like, sure, but as long as it's not depressing, which she's not depressing. She's like, as long as it's not hard, because I can't handle that right now. And I was like, it's hard. It's a hard book, but I love that. I love reading hard books. And this person did too. And was like, I just can't do it right now, but I'll be in conversation with the author once the book is published. I was like, I get it. We're having a weird moment. So that comes out in February. And then in April, the 2nd anthology comes out, which is called Witch, which is going to be very exciting. And then in May, a short story collection by Naz Riahi, which is called Vibrations. It's an incredible book that comes out. And then what else? This bizarre, unhinged, beautiful book. It's a collection of affirmations. It's called Self-Romancing by this poet and writer, Elle Scully, who lives in Boston. It's like a memoir through affirmations. It's really, when it came in, I didn't know Elle Scully until I know them now, but they just submitted it to us, and I was like, what the hell is this? This is unhinged. I love this. I love it so much. This is so strange and fun. And so we're publishing that. And then Brooke Palmieri's Bargain Witch, essays about Brooke's history of being a witch, working in an occult bookstore. It's really, he just sent me the final. It's ready for my edit. So I'm so excited to dig into it.
There are no parents, no other adults, no one to interfere with the fun.
Do you have a puppet story?
Do I have a puppet story? Oh my God.
Everyone has a puppet
This
story.
is just so interesting. In the early zeros, my friend Clint Catalyst, who is so many things. We've been friends for a million years, and he's a writer. And he was involved. He was living in LA, and I was living in San Francisco, and he was involved in this series called Puppet Terror. And it was just this, like, I don't know, there was this moment where, like, he's goth for life. Goths were, like, really obsessed with puppets. And so he brought his Puppet Terror reading. I helped him set up a reading in San Francisco, at this bar that used to be called the Chameleon. Now I think it's called Amnesia. And yeah, we did a Puppet Terror reading. So, Puppet Terror.
That's amazing. And were there puppeteers doing the readings?
There were some people who had puppets, or people were reading about puppets. People brought dolls and puppets and stuff.
Oh, big puppet
Yeah.
theme.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay,
what comes
that's
to mind. Yeah. It's hard to be, I feel like there's a lot of subcultures that have that are puppet adjacent, you know what I mean? Feminist activism loves a big puppet. There used to be the Wise Fool Puppet Theater in San Francisco, whenever there was a protest or a street festival, they'd be out there with their giant puppets, And I was friends with those folks, yeah.